Hey everybody, this is a demonstration video for the final section of the text portion of class. It'll also be the final assignment that we do this semester. So it's fairly simple in terms of the way that it's set up, and it's really a test of your inventiveness and creativity when it comes to looking at letters and different sort of fonts and letter forms really as aesthetic objects, looking at them for shape, for movement, for kind of organic forms. So you really have to think about letters as being artistic objects for this assignment, and do a lot of experimentation. So the assignment happens in 3 stages, and you can read about those stages on Blackboard. But essentially, there's an experimental stage where we work with small letters. Then there's going to be a sort of rough draft stage. And then there's a final stage where you take the sort of winning design or the best design that you come up with, and you execute it in a large format in ink using Sharpie pens or Micron pens or something like that. So let me just describe how it works. And I'll try to keep this fairly brief because I don't want to belabor it too much. But the first step is basically to print out, and if you've read the assignment sheet, obviously you know what letters we're working with. So you're choosing the 3 letters of your initials. So I'm Patrick Edward Foreign, so PEF. If you don't have a middle name, I know some people don't have a middle name, you can make up a middle letter because you do need 3 letters for this project. Or you can use, maybe a parent or a sibling's initials if you'd prefer. But if you can, use the 3 letters of your name, and you're going to print out versions of those letters in different fonts at different sizes, and using italics, book, oblique, bold, light, all the different variations that you can for that letter. And the specific variations are spelled out in the assignment sheet. You're only allowed to use 4 different fonts. So there are 2 serif fonts and 2 sans serif fonts. And it's Garamond and Baskerville are the serif fonts, and Helvetica and Avenir are the sans serif. And you'll see there's with each one there's somewhere between 3 and 5 different variations of that font. And then when you take into account that you have lowercase letters, capital letters, you can do capital, bold, lowercase, italic. There's thousands and thousands of different combinations just with 4 fonts and 3 different letters. So the first thing to do would be to print off a sheet, a kind of like a test sheet that has a bunch of versions of that letter, of your initials, in those different variations. Now, this is done in 120 point font. I think that's a good place to start out with for the experimental section. You can, of course, go smaller or larger if you like, but 120 is a good place to start. It gives you letters that are about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches tall for the capitals. So then basically you're going to need, the only other things you need for this assignment are graphite pencils, an eraser, and tracing paper. So this is where, the tracing paper was one of the required materials for the class, and this is where it's going to come into play. Now, if right now you're thinking, oh crap, I didn't get any tracing paper and I don't know where I can get it, I do have a couple of methods that you can use if you don't have tracing paper. You'll have to stick around to the end of the video and I'll talk about those. So if you have tracing paper, you don't have to worry about it. If not, there are a few other options. So the easiest thing, of course, is to use tracing paper. Now, the idea of the assignment is that what you're creating is you're using those initials to create something that we're going to call a logotype. Now, a logotype is essentially a symbolic form that's made out of geometric lines and curves and all the shapes and forms that we've talked about throughout class. Now, it's important that it doesn't represent anything directly. So you're not spelling out your initials, you're not spelling out something else, and you don't want to use the letters to sort of spell out or sort of to create something that's pictographic. So you don't want to use the letters to draw a face or a dog or something like that. If you want to do some of the experimental ones that way, above the 12, so there are, again, from the assignment sheet, you know that there are 12 experiments that are required. If you want to go beyond the 12 and play around and use your letters to create bats or cats or a house or whatever you want, you can do that. But 12 of them need to be purely logotypes, and the 3 rough drafts and also the final draft have to be a logotype. Now, what I really encourage you to do is play around, especially in the experimental section, with using just sections of the letters and putting them together in zoom in on this a little bit so you can see, put them together in varieties that and forms that get further away from their representational nature as letters. So further away from what the letters look like to begin with. Again, this is supposed to be symbolic, and it's supposed to be representational and abstract. Sorry, more abstract than representational. Normally letters are very representational. So these were just kind of a couple of experiments that I did using my initials. And if we're going to like critique this, this is a student's example from a previous semester. If we were going to critique this, it actually is very nice. It's cleanly rendered. It's got kind of a pleasing form. I do think this was the arrangement. Yeah, you can see the signature down here at the bottom. So yeah, this is the way that it's supposed to be displayed. My major critique with this one is that it doesn't go far enough in terms of abstracting the form of the letters. So the idea is good, the character of it is good, but the P is still far too clear. I think this was a P, an A, and an H. So the letters are too clear. They haven't been manipulated or sort of fragmented or fractured or experimented with enough. So good execution, bad, basically you could say the sort of experimentation and the formal nature of it needs a lot of work. So obviously, once you get into to do the experiments and to get into your experimental stage, what you should do is start looking at your letters, right? And thinking not just about the overall form, but think about breaking it down into sections, right? So in the F, for instance, we have 2 curves, a middle stem, and a cross stem or a cross piece, right? So when I'm tracing the sections, I can use and I can rotate my paper, and I'll just do this quickly. You'll want to do this more, carefully. But for instance, I could use this part of the E and stop right there. And then I can kind of take that section and rotate it and sort of see where it connects or where it lines up. So let's say I want to use part of the stem of the F. So then I can take that part of the F and connect like this. And then I'll cut that off there. And you'd be filling these in as you were going, obviously. And then I can kind of, so now I kind of have to remember what I used already. And then I can go over and maybe connect this to the curve of the P, right? So what I'm doing is I'm looking at sections of the letters, and I'm sort of starting to build kind of a symbol there. And that's what I did with each of these different experiments. So some of these I was following the rules, and some of them I wasn't. So basically the rules, as you saw from the assignment sheet, is that for each one of these designs that you create, you have to use every part of each letter. So I have to use, a full P, a full P, and a full P, a full E, and a full F in each design that I make. Now I can use the curve of the, I believe this is Garamond. I should remember that. So I could use the curve of the Garamond P, the post of the italic Garamond P, the cross beam, let's say from the Avenir F, the tall stem from the capital Garamond F, right? So you can combine different pieces of the same letter from different fonts, different styles, different sizes. So you can adjust all of those characteristics, which font, which style, which size, but each logotype has to be made of at least each part of all 3 of the letters. Okay, so these experiments that I did here, let me turn this over so it's easier to see. These experiments that I did here, this is just using lowercase italics Garamond. So that's all that and I came up with, this was just a kind of fun one where I basically took the curve of the F and just layered it a whole bunch of times and kept, I basically just kept using pieces of it and rotating it, and then I'd use like half of it in a different orientation, shift it a little bit, just to kind of, as an experiment, just to see what I could get out of just the curve of the F, and created this kind of wheel pattern. I think probably of these, the most successful one is this one right here. This one, actually, if you know Aramaic or Arabic script, this looks a lot like Aramaic. And if you, I would really encourage you to look up, just like Google or look on Wikipedia, like ancient writing forms or different pictographic languages. Basically English and French and German and a lot of romantic languages use the Roman alphabet, of course. But there's everything from Sanskrit to Thai, most Eastern languages, Arabic, and Aramaic, as I mentioned, any, Japanese, Chinese, any form of Mandarin. Those are all pictographic languages. So they use symbols and signs that are drawn rather than Roman letters. So you can use those and even look at like earlier or ancient writing forms and kind of use those as inspiration for some of the ways to combine your letters. But you can just see some of the different, these are just my letters, my initials backwards, so that they sort of overlap a little bit. So I didn't even do any fragmentation there. That one's a little bit boring. Then I started kind of pulling them apart in this one, and got something where this kind of feels like a shelf. And then the E has got like, right. So this is still the full letters. I haven't fragmented them at all. I've just sort of like, all I've done is really, traced them and then rotated a bit. So you can do some experiments where you come up with programs where you say, okay, I'm going to do one bold, one italic, one thin, which is that's what the light means, is like the thin one. So one light, one italic, one bold. I'll do one capital, two lowercase, and each time I'll change fonts and I'll rotate the paper by like a quarter turn or something like that. So you can come up with little programs for yourself, or you can just do what you think looks interesting. This one up at the top here, oops, where is it? This one, I started, so that's just leaving the letters as they are. That's leaving the letters as they are, but rotating them a bit. This is actually starting to pull them apart. It looks a little bit mechanical. It's starting to look a bit more like a symbol. It actually kind of looks, now that I think about it, if you remember when Prince changed his name to that symbol, unpronounceable symbol, it kind of looks like that. And then by fragmenting them and even more sort of pulling apart the letters, I get this thing that is sort of more in the realm of like Arabic or Aramaic. So again, that's all the same size, all the same font, only using italics. So obviously when you have, the full range of different styles available to you, you can really do a lot. So the first part that's going to be due for this assignment is going to be a small section of experiments. So at least 12. Some people get really carried away. I've had people do like 30 or 40 of these, but at least 12 done at the smaller size. You could probably fit these all on one sheet of paper. I would recommend using 2 sheets of paper, like 2 8x10. It sort of depends. I guess if you have big, like I have a big, 18x24 pad of tracing paper. So if you have a big sheet of tracing paper, you could easily fit all of them on one page. But if you have something like this, which is 8.5x11, I believe, or maybe it's 10x12. Anyway, if you have smaller tracing paper, I recommend doing your 12 experiments on 2 different pages. And that's the first section that'll be due. When you move on to the second sections, basically what you're going to do is from your 12 experiments, you'll pick 3, or all look at your experiments and help you pick 3 that are the best. Now those 3 you're going to enlarge and do something more like this size for your 3 rough drafts. So for that, you're going to have to take those same letters. So for each of these that you do, you'll want to label it so that you remember later on. For me, it's easy because I only use Garamond italics 120 point. So I would want to label this 120 point italic Garamond. Right? So you're going to want to write that down for each one of your designs, especially if you use combinations of different letters, because later, of course, you're going to have to recreate 3 of them, and then from those 3, you'll have to recreate one winner at a larger scale. So you'll have to kind of remember what you did. So for the second stage, which is the rough drafts, you're going to print the letters off much bigger. Now, when I say much bigger, you can adjust the size as you want. This is, I believe, so this is again Garamond italic. I think this is about 500 point, maybe 450 point font. But you can use the rulers. I'm assuming most people will be using Microsoft Word for this or Google Docs. Either one of them will work fine. They have all of these fonts available. So you can use the ruler. There's a ruler on your document that will tell you, show you the actual size. So the second stage, the rough drafts and the final draft, they're going to be done on 11 by 15. Well, the two rough drafts are 8 by 10, and then the final one is 11 by 15. So they're going to be something like this. So you're looking for letters that are going to be, more like 4 or 5 inches tall. So you can experiment with different sizes, but you're going to have to print things at a size that you can sort of like create a larger composition like this. I don't have any examples of the rough drafts, but basically the rough drafts are this size, but just can be done in graphite. And then the final draft, which will be like this, is going to be done. Obviously you want to start out doing it in pencil, but then you'll go over it using Sharpie. So like Sharpie pens. Not sure what I did with my felt tip marker. It fell on the floor somewhere. But basically, you're going to use different pens and markers in order to render it in ink. And then for the final one, you glue stick the tracing paper. If you are using tracing paper, this person used tape, so you could also use transparent tape, onto a sheet of Bristol board. This is actually a black matte paper, but onto your Bristol board that you have at home. So let's see. The only other thing, or one other thing to point out, okay, now when you're doing your tracing, obviously you're going to be, I did a quick one up here where I just did the outline. Most of these you're going to be filling in. And so what you want to use is graphite that is not too soft, not too dark. Look for a pencil that's somewhere in the middle range. This is an HB. That's actually the one that I prefer for this project. HB is like right in the middle. What happens is if you use one that's too dark, like a 4B, 5B, 6B, you'll just find that the graphite smudges all over the place. It's probably going to smudge anyway, even if you use a slightly harder one. If you go too light, like to a 2H, 4H, then it just doesn't make a dark enough mark on the paper. So somewhere in the middle, like HB, H, or 2B is good. And remember that just classic yellow school pencils, those are 2B. So 2B, this is an HB. I recommend this one. Now, again, the reason you need the eraser is because you'll probably make mistakes, and also you'll probably end up at some point getting, I don't know if you can see, but getting like graphite on your hand and you'll smudge it a little bit. So the eraser is meant to clean things up. So even in the experimental stage, you should still go back through and, kind of like clean up the edges where they kind of got soft. Go in and darken and sharpen things up, fill them in, make sure that they're nice and clear. So that's important in the experimental stage. It's especially important in the rough draft and, of course, the final stage. Okay, so if you have tracing paper, you can stop there. For people that don't have tracing paper, I'm just going to show you a couple other methods that you could use if you need to. So one of them, it basically involves creating a mini light box for yourself if you don't have any tracing paper. So I'm going to demonstrate this with an iPad, but really any screen, a laptop, a desktop. You could even do it on a television. Believe it or not, I've done this kind of thing on a television before. But if you have some kind of whatever type of screen you have, oops, that's not my passcode. Okay, so all I did was just download an image of a white screen, and then if I zoom in on that, then you'll see. So if you don't have tracing paper, then obviously you'll want to print out your letters. Let me find my smaller letters here. Print out your letters. And then since you don't have tracing paper, you'll do this on just like a sheet of, printer paper, and you can lay it over the top. And as long as you've got a white screen, things are sliding off my, off my drafting table here. You'll want to darken the room, so I'm going to turn the light off here, and you can see, right, if I've got a white screen on my iPad, this is not tracing paper. This is just, right, 2 sheets of printer paper. I can still do the same thing, right? I'm basically using my iPad as like a light box, and I can still go in and, trace my letters and do it like that, right? And then, so then I have it like that. So, yes. So, you could use a iPad with a white screen. You could use a laptop, flip it on its side. I've actually done this before when I ran out of tracing paper and I needed to trace something. You can use, anything that illuminates. I guess if worse came to worse, you could, well, that wouldn't really work to use a flashlight. But yeah, you'll have to find a screen or something with illumination. Now, obviously, tracing paper is much easier, but in a pinch, you can use a screen. Okay. Oh, I also forgot to mention, you'll see this in some of the examples, but you can actually, in addition to using different fonts, right, you can also keep the letters when you trace them open or closed. Most people don't do this. Most people like the look of the sort of like fully, blackened letters. It's just more kind of satisfying. But open letter means that you trace the outline and leave the inside black. So you can do that for all of your letters. You could use parts of them that are left open, parts that are filled in. That's kind of up to you. And if I have lots of examples that I've posted on Blackboard. So you'll see tons of different variations in that sense when you look at the examples. Okay, so good luck with this project. Check Blackboard, of course, for the assignment sheet with all the due dates, and I look forward to seeing your experiments.